It's one of these things where it just seems like it's almost overkill in one sense, but then actually when you think about it, there's just no other obvious way of solving this problem. We've got this fundamental problem that if you keep a bike in some sort of shed or an enclosed space and you put it in there when it's wet, it's not going to dry out, and you're just promoting this rust environment. So even though you think you're putting it away, you're actually just creating this environment where the bike is still going to rust over winter. So these bikes are getting pretty heavy duty usage. They're coming back wet. And over winter, if they just sort of dump them on the patio, the bikes just get in a terrible way. You know, everything rusts, the bearings rust out in the hubs, and the headset and the chain is just a disaster. You know, everything deteriorates so quickly with a bike that's exposed to essentially British relentless winter rain, where it just stays wet the entire time. So I was sort of thinking, actually, I don't want to solve this problem by just thinking in terms of a shed, because that's not going to let the bikes dry out either. So the only sensible way of thinking about this is some sort of cover, a lean-to, essentially just a lean-to with a bike rack underneath it, so the bikes can be wheeled in, they're out of the rain, but they're also allowed to air dry because the lean-to is essentially just open around the edges. And this is just such an obvious solution. So kind of thinking what is the easiest way of doing this? And I'd never built anything like this, essentially a roof. I didn't really know where to start. And actually AI was phenomenally useful in kind of helping me understand the structure of what it is that I needed to build. So this is the basic principle for putting one of these together is super simple. So you have the headers, which are essentially, if you had a wall and you were building a roof over a wall, these would be the horizontal edges, and then on that you rest your rafters. So these are the things that go down in line with the roof, and obviously you have to decide on what kind of a slope, what kind of a pitch you want this roof to be. So for me, I actually reversed this. I thought I was originally going to build this thing with it coming sort of down, so it would go up away from you, and you would put the bikes in with the lower bit. Of course, that doesn't really make any sense. It might as well go the other way around, and the water goes off towards the back of it, and then you can obviously just sort of wheel the bikes in and out. So the idea is that you have rafters that go from the headers, they go down, and you can work out the sort of spacing that you want for this. And I'll put the dimensions of the wood that I ended up using after kind of quizzing the AIs about what the tolerances of the different thickness of wood would be and what's structurally suitable for this kind of approach. Obviously, worst case scenario, the thing has 2 feet of snow on it. It's clearly not going to happen in maybe a 1 in 10 year event, but if it happens, I want it to be able to put up with that weight. So I wanted it to be reasonably strong here. So then the idea is, once you've got these rafters, then you put purlins, which are the thinner, smaller ones that go horizontally across that roof. And those are the ones that you then screw the corrugated sheeting onto the top. So these are corrugated bitumen sheets. They're really good. They're really light. They're very easy to work with. They're a little bit of a hassle to saw and cut. There's a couple of kind of errors that I made, and the edge is not very refined. Obviously, it could be neatened up. And if you were making a dead square one, you could work with the factory edges of these things a lot better than I did. But essentially, you put that on top of the purlins, and then you screw it into those across. And then you've got this really strong structure. In real terms, you're probably going to be putting it in the corner of something. So you can use your existing fence posts or whatever else you have that you're building it to. And so I put one of the uprights against the garage wall. And so I used this 10mm bolt where you just drill a 10mm hole into the brick, and then you put these massive great bolts. I'm not sure if that was the right approach. They're pretty big holes, and it's definitely blown off the kind of face of the brickwork around the hole where I was bolting these things through. I could see it coming off behind the wood. I think in hindsight, perhaps a smaller hole with your standard wall plug would have been a preferable option. This, I think, is massive overkill. It doesn't need to be that strong, that upright against the garage wall there, but it is what it is now, and it's in place. And then actually I had the pull-up bar that kind of just worked to be the other corner. So I just basically put one of these header bits of wood across from the pull-up bar upright to the garage support, and then the other header just literally screwed straight into my fence posts. And then obviously the rafters go down and the purlins go on top of that, and you've got a lean-to. And then obviously you can just get a sort of Amazon bike stand or whatever to put underneath it, and the bikes just wheel in and out. It sort of seems like it's so simple, but actually it's taken me years to come up with this and stick with this, as a format. And I'm just so pleased with the way it works. You can see the bikes go in damp, and they just dry almost immediately within that airflow. Having the bike upright is, again, another really beneficial thing. It just, having a bike lying on its side just seems such a terrible, sad thing to see. The water is just pooling in all of the bearings. A bike upright is just so much better at drying itself like that, and water runs out of the bearings and so on. So a much better way of thinking about bike storage. So it's just so much easier for the kids to get the bikes out from this than it was if they were stored in the garage. And this is why they never were stored in the garage, and they ended up rusting and getting in such a terrible state because they were just left out in the garden. Because the barrier for a kid to get a bike out of a garage is just so hard. You have to reserve so much space in the garage to allow a bike to be wheeled in and out without knocking other stuff down. It's just, you write off half the garage. It's just impractical to reserve that much space. And of course then, you know, if you've got the bikes on the floor, you're just wasting all of that vertical space that could be shelving. So it just doesn't work, the idea of keeping a bike in a garage. And a small bike shed style shed doesn't work either because they don't dry out. So yeah, really pleased with the way that's come together. Just brilliant little project. I think if you've got bikes and you've got a garden, this is a no-brainer. Everyone needs one of these in the corner of their garden.